The sky turned black on a Tuesday morning in April. Cole stood on the observation deck of the orbital station and watched as thousands of alien vessels emerged from nothing. They appeared like ghosts stepping through an invisible door, one after another, until the stars themselves disappeared behind a wall of metal and light. He had served in the United Earth Defense Force for 20 years. He had trained for war. He had prepared for first contact, but nothing could have prepared him for this. "Commander," said the young officer beside him, her voice shaking, "we are receiving transmissions from every major city on Earth. People are panicking." Said nothing. What could he say? The alien fleet was so large that their sensors could not even count all the ships. Earth's entire defense force, the pride of humanity's expansion into space, looked like toys in comparison. Within 3 hours, the battle was over. It was not really a battle at all. The aliens disabled every human warship without killing a single person. Their weapons did not destroy. They simply turned everything off. Engines went silent. Weapons went cold. The great ships of humanity drifted in space like dead fish floating in water. Was brought down to Earth along with the other military commanders. They gathered in Geneva in the Great Hall of the United Nations, and they waited. Everyone knew what was coming. This was how it ended. This was how humanity died. The alien ship that landed in the plaza was not the largest, but it was somehow the most frightening. It was made of something that looked like glass and metal combined, and it glowed with a soft purple light. When the door opened, the being that stepped out made everyone take a step backward. The creature was tall, perhaps 3 meters high. Its body seemed to be made of living crystal, with veins of light running through it like blood. It had no face that humans could recognize, just smooth surfaces that reflected the world around it, yet somehow felt that it was looking at them, looking at all of them. A device floated beside the creature, and when it spoke, the device translated its words into human language. "I am," the being said, "High Arbiter of the Dominion. I have come to deliver judgment." Admiral Laura stepped forward. She was the highest-ranking military officer still standing, and her voice did not shake even though her hands did. "We are not your enemies," she said. "We did not know you existed. We have harmed no one." Was silent for a long moment. The crystals of his body shifted and changed color, moving through shades of blue and purple. "You are not our enemies yet," said, "but you will be. Your species is young. You are violent. You have the potential to grow into something dangerous. They have protected the galaxy for 10,000 years. We have done so by removing threats before they can mature." Ambassador Daniel, an old man with gray hair and tired eyes, stepped beside Admiral. "You would kill us for something we have not done, for something we might never do." "It is not killing," replied. "It is prevention. A gardener does not hate the weed. He simply removes it so the garden can flourish." Felt anger rise in his chest. He wanted to scream at this creature, to fight, to do something. But what could he do? What could any of them do? Then something happened that no one expected. A sound came from the crowd of humans gathered behind the barrier. It was a child crying. A little girl, perhaps 4 years old, had gotten separated from her mother in the chaos. She stood alone in the open plaza, sobbing with fear, not understanding what was happening. Her mother pushed through the crowd. Soldiers tried to stop her, but she broke free and ran toward her daughter. She did not look at the alien. She did not care about the judgment of the. She only cared about reaching her child. She scooped the little girl into her arms and held her tight, putting her own body between her daughter and the crystal giant. She expected to die. Everyone could see that she expected to die, but she did it anyway. "Watch this." His body went very still, and the lights inside him flickered strangely. Then, from across the plaza, saw something else. A group of human soldiers were carrying wounded people on stretchers. Some of those wounded were aliens, members of the ground teams who had been injured when a building collapsed during the landing. The humans were treating them with the same care as their own injured. No one had ordered them to do it, they simply did it. Saw this too. He saw the mother and child. He saw the soldiers helping his own people. He stood in silence for so long that some humans thought his translation device had broken. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, softer somehow. "I have lived for 6,000 years, said. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species burn themselves to ash and others become monsters that consumed everything they touched. I have never been wrong about a species. Never." He paused. "But I find myself uncertain about you." The other commanders who had remained in their ships began sending messages. Could not understand them, but he could tell from the flashing lights that they were angry. They wanted the judgment to proceed. They wanted humanity erased. Raised one crystalline arm, and the messages stopped. 10,000 years ago, I helped write the laws of our dominion. I have never broken them. Today, I will." He looked at the gathered humans, and though he had no eyes, felt the weight of his gaze. "You are infants," said. "Dangerous infants, perhaps, but there is something in you that I have not seen before. You protect your young with no thought for yourselves. You show mercy to enemies who came to destroy you. There is light in you alongside the darkness." He turned and walked back toward his ship. "We will leave now. You will not see us again, but know this, humanity. We have given you a gift that we have never given any species before. We have given you time. Use it wisely. Grow into something worthy of the stars. Because if we return and find that our mercy was wasted, there will be no second chance." The fleet departed that night. They disappeared the same way they had come, stepping through invisible doors into nothing. On Earth, people wept with relief. They held each other and thanked gods they were not sure they believed in. The day of mercy, they would call it. The day humanity was spared. But Cole stood alone on that plaza long after everyone else had left. He looked up at the stars that were visible again, and he made a promise to himself. "We will not waste this. We will become something worthy, and someday, somehow, we will find a way to thank them." He did not know that it would take 125 years. He did not know that the thanks humanity would offer would be beyond anything could have imagined. But that is a story for another time. 100 years is a long time for a human. It is long enough for children to become grandparents, long enough for cities to rise and fall, long enough for the world to change in ways that no one could have predicted. But humanity did not forget. Every year on April 15th, the whole planet stopped. Schools closed, offices emptied. Families gathered together and watched the old recordings from that day in Geneva. They saw the alien fleet darken the sky. They saw deliver his judgment. They saw the mother run to her child and the soldiers carry the wounded, and they remembered how close everything had come to ending. The Day of Mercy became more than a holiday. It became a promise. Brooks was born 60 years after the left. By the time he became Fleet Admiral of the Terran Accord, humanity had spread across 200 star systems. They had faster ships, better technology, and enough military power to defend themselves against most threats in the galaxy. But they did not use that power the way other species expected. The galaxy, learned early in his career, was a cruel place. Empires rose by crushing smaller species. Slavery was common. Entire planets were stripped of resources while their populations starved. The strong took what they wanted and the weak suffered. Humanity could have joined that game. They had the ships. They had the weapons. Some politicians even argued that they should build an empire of their own, take what they needed, and make sure no one ever threatened Earth again. But every time those arguments came up, someone would stand and remind them of the promise. They spared us because they saw something good in us. If we become conquerors, we prove them wrong. We make their mercy meaningless. Is that what we want? Is that who we are? The answer was always no. Brooks led the fleet that responded to the crisis. There were a small, peaceful species who had been invaded by the Empire. They wanted their planet for mining, and they did not care that 3 billion lived there. They began moving the population into camps, working them to death in the mines. The Terran Accord had no treaty with they had never even met them before. There was no strategic reason to help. Took the fleet anyway. The commanders laughed when the human ships arrived. They sent a message telling the humans to leave or be destroyed. Sent a message back. It was simple and direct. We are here to protect these people. If you want to continue hurting them, you will have to go through us. And I promise you, that will not end well for anyone. They attacked. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the fleet was broken and they were free. Did not ask for payment. He did not ask for territory or resources. He only asked them to remember that humanity stood with them when no one else would. Word spread across the galaxy. There was a species called humans, people said. They fought for strangers. They protected the weak. They asked for nothing in return except friendship. Some thought it was a trick. Some thought the humans were fools. But the rescued species knew the truth, and they joined the Terran Accord one by one, not as subjects but as partners, not out of fear but out of gratitude and trust. Price led a different kind of mission. She was the director of the Terran Science Collective, and her passion was healing dying worlds. The galaxy was full of dead planets. Some had been killed by war. Some had been poisoned by pollution. Some had simply been used up and thrown away like empty containers. Everyone accepted this as normal. Planets died. That was just how things worked. Refused to accept it. She gathered scientists from a dozen species and created technology that could bring dead worlds back to life. They cleaned poisoned oceans. They restored ruined atmospheres. They planted new forests on barren rock. Their greatest project was the planet 7. It had once been a beautiful world, home to a species called the. 1,000 years ago, a war had killed the planet. They survived on space stations, homeless refugees, while their world rotted below them. And her team worked for 15 years. They rebuilt the atmosphere molecule by molecule. They cleaned the soil. They brought water from distant comets. And finally, they planted the first tree. When they returned to their world for the first time in a millennium, they wept with joy. They built statues of human scientists in their capital city. They named their children after and her team. Why, they asked her, why did you do this for us? We are nothing to you. Smiled and gave the same answer that every human gave. Because someone once showed us mercy when they did not have to. Because we learned that kindness matters. Because this is who we choose to be. But not everything was healing and rescue. Sometimes humanity had to fight. Samuel Torres was a diplomat, not a soldier, but his work saved more lives than any fleet. He spent 40 years traveling between species that had been at war for generations. He sat with their leaders. He listened to their anger and their pain. He found common ground where everyone else saw only hatred. His greatest achievement was the Peace of Orion, a treaty that ended a war between 3 species that had lasted for 2,000 years. Billions of lives had been lost. Entire star systems had been destroyed. Everyone believed the war would continue until only one species remained. Samuel proved them wrong. It took him 12 years of negotiation. He survived 3 assassination attempts. He lost friends and colleagues along the way. But in the end, the 3 species signed the treaty and began the long work of healing. When people asked him how he did it, Samuel always said the same thing. I reminded them that someone once looked at humanity and saw something worth saving, even though we were dangerous and violent. If they could see potential in us, surely these species could see it in each other. Throughout all of this, humanity searched for the. They sent ships to the regions of space where the alien fleet had come from. They broadcast messages of thanks into the void. They built monuments and wrote songs and kept the memory of alive. But they found only silence. They had disappeared. Their territory was empty. Their cities were abandoned. No one in the galaxy knew what had happened to them. Some said they had moved on to another galaxy. Some said they had ascended to a higher form of existence. Some said they had simply died out, the way old empires sometimes did. For 100 years, humanity grew and changed and became something new. They became protectors, healers, peacemakers. They remembered every day that they had been given a second chance, and they worked every day to prove that they deserved it. They never forgot the promise they had made. And then, in the year 2312, a ship found something that changed everything. A faint signal, a cry for help, and a truth so terrible that it would shake humanity to its core. They were not gone, they were dying. And now it was humanity's turn to make a choice. Captain Christopher Lane had been exploring the edge of known space for 3 years when his ship detected the signal. It was weak, barely more than a whisper against the background noise of the universe. His communications officer almost missed it, but something about the pattern caught her attention, and she ran it through the translation systems. The words that came back made her blood run cold. "This is the last refuge of the Dominion. We are surrounded. We cannot hold much longer. If anyone receives this message, remember us. Remember that we once held the stars." Christopher ordered his ship to change course immediately. They followed the signal for 6 weeks, traveling deeper into unexplored space than any human vessel had ever gone. What they found when they arrived broke their hearts. It was enormous. It circled a dying star, a structure so vast that it made planets look like pebbles. Once it had been home to billions. Now it was a tomb surrounded by hunters. The enemy ships were everywhere. They were not like anything Christopher had ever seen. They were organic, grown rather than built, and they moved through space like swarms of insects. They circled the endlessly, testing its defenses, probing for weaknesses. These were the Or. Christopher had heard stories about them. Everyone in the galaxy had. They came from the dark space between galaxies, from places where no star had ever shone. They did not conquer. They did not negotiate. They consumed. They absorbed other species into there, turning living beings into puppets, adding their knowledge and strength to the swarm. For thousands of years, they had been the only force strong enough to keep the Or at bay. Now they were dying, and the Or were hungry. Christopher managed to slip past the enemy swarm using techniques the Or had never encountered. Human ships were small and fast and clever, and they could hide in places where larger vessels could not go. He landed on the and was met by survivors. They were not the proud, powerful beings that the old recordings showed. They were broken. Their crystalline bodies were cracked and dim, their lights flickering weakly. They looked at the humans with something that might have been hope and might have been despair. There were less than 4 million of them left. 4 million survivors of an empire that had once ruled 3 galaxies. How, Christopher asked their leader, an elder named, how did this happen? His voice was tired, the translation coming through slow and heavy. The Or attacked without warning. They came in numbers we had never seen. For every swarm we destroyed, 10 more appeared. For every world we defended, they took 3 others. Our fleets were scattered. Our leaders were killed or absorbed. We retreated here to our last stronghold, and we have been fighting ever since. How long? 23 years. Christopher felt the weight of those words. 23 years of constant battle. 23 years of watching their civilization crumble. 23 years of dying slowly. Is alive? He asked. Was silent for a moment, then he said, "Follow me." They walked through corridors that had once been beautiful but were now by war. They passed memorials to the fallen. They passed hospitals filled with the wounded. They passed children who had never known anything but sea. Finally, they reached a chamber deep within and there, resting on a platform of fading light was. The High Arbiter was ancient now. His crystalline form, once brilliant and strong, was cracked in 100 places. The lights that had flowed through him like blood were dim and unsteady. He looked like a statue that was slowly falling apart. But when he saw the humans, something flickered in those dying lights. "Humans," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, "you found us." Christopher knelt before him. "High Arbiter, we received your distress signal. We came as fast as we could." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "We did not send that signal for help. We sent it so that someone would remember, so that the galaxy would know what happened to the, even after we are gone. Gone, you are still here. You are still fighting. We are losing. They break through our defenses a little more each day. Our power fails. Our people die. In 6 months, perhaps less, they will breach the inner walls, and then," paused, "then they will exist only in memory." Christopher stood up. His heart was pounding, his hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "No." Looked at him, "No. We are not going to let you die, not like this, not after everything you did for us." For a long moment said nothing. Then he spoke, and his voice was gentle. "Young human, we are grateful for your kindness, but this is not your fight. They are beyond anything you have faced. Your species is still young, still growing. If you come here in force, you will only add your bodies to theirs. Your minds will join the swarm. Your civilization will fall alongside ours. We do not care. You should. You have a future, a bright one. We saw it in you 100 years ago. Do not throw it away for a dying people." Christopher thought about everything he had learned growing up. He thought about the day of mercy. He thought about the promise humanity had made. He thought about all the species they had helped, all the worlds they had healed, all the wars they had ended. "High Arbiter," he said, 125 years ago your fleet came to Earth. You could have destroyed us. You had every reason to destroy us, but you looked at us and saw something worth saving. You gave us a chance when you did not have to. Listened in silence. We spent a century trying to prove that you were right about us. We became protectors because of you. We became healers because of you. Everything good that humanity has done since that day, we did because you showed us that mercy matters." Christopher stepped closer to the ancient arbiter. "Now you are dying, and you ask us to walk away, to leave you here, to let the species that gave us our future disappear from the universe." He shook his head. "No, that is not who we are. That is not who you taught us to be." He opened his communicator and sent a message to his ship. The message would be relayed to Earth. It would reach the Terran Accord. It would be heard by every human in the galaxy. "We are coming," he said, "all of us. And we are going to fight for you the way you once chose not to fight against us. We are going to save you, High Arbiter, because that is what family does." Was silent for a long time. His lights flickered strangely, and if a being made of crystal could weep, perhaps he did. On Earth, the message arrived at midnight. By morning, the largest fleet in human history was being assembled. The children of Earth were going to war. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Terran Unity and watched the stars blur past. 4,000 warships flew in formation behind her, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. 12,000 support vessels carried supplies, medical equipment, and 2 million volunteers who had signed up knowing they might never come home. Was 57 years old. Her grandmother had been a young soldier on the day they came to Earth. She had told the story 1,000 times, the fear, the helplessness, the moment when everyone thought they were going to die, and then the miracle of mercy. Now was leading humanity's answer to that miracle. The journey to the took 3 months. 3 months of preparation, 3 months of training, 3 months of wondering what they would find when they arrived. What they found was worse than they had imagined. The swarm had grown since Captain Lane's visit. Millions of organic ships surrounded the now, pressing against its shields like hungry animals trying to break into a cage. The shields were failing. In some places, they had already fallen. or ground forces were fighting in the outer sections of the, pushing deeper every day. General Benjamin Wright led the ground forces. He was a quiet man who spoke softly and carried himself with calm authority. His soldiers would follow him anywhere, not because he ordered them to, but because they trusted him completely. "We have 6 weeks," he told his commanders before the first battle. "Maybe less. If we do not break the swarm by then the falls, and if the falls the die, all of them, every last one." He looked at the faces around him, human faces, young and old, scared and determined. "We are not going to let that happen." The first wave hit from 3 directions at once. The aliens had never faced an enemy that fought the way humans did. They were used to opponents who attacked in straight lines, who followed predictable patterns, who could be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Humans did not fight that way. Split our fleet into hundreds of small groups. They struck fast and disappeared before the swarm could respond. They used asteroids as cover. They hid in the shadows of the itself. They appeared from nowhere, delivered devastating attacks, and vanished again. The or were confused. They worked by processing information from millions of sources, finding patterns and responding with perfect coordination. But humans did not create patterns. They created chaos. Pilot Rachel Monroe became a legend in the first week. She flew a small fighter, nimble and quick, and she seemed to know what the enemy was going to do before they did it. In one battle, she destroyed 17 or 100 drones in 90 seconds. In another, she flew directly into an enemy carrier and detonated her weapons core inside it, escaping at the last moment in an emergency pod. Her fellow pilots called her Ghost. The or had no name for her, but they learned to fear her. On the ground, Sargent led a company of soldiers defending a critical junction in this outer ring. The or attacked his position for 18 hours straight, wave after wave of converted beings who had once been but were now puppets of the. And his soldiers held the line, 9 of them against thousands. They ran out of ammunition and fought with knives. They ran out of knives and fought with their hands. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found still standing, surrounded by the bodies of fallen enemies, too tired to speak but refusing to fall. Dr. Hammond led the medical teams. They worked without rest, treating wounded humans and side by side. They were amazed. They had never seen another species care for their injured with such dedication. "Why do you help us?" one wounded asked a human nurse. "We are not your people." The nurse smiled as she treated his wounds. "Today you are." The war lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks of constant battle, 6 weeks of death and sacrifice and moments of impossible courage. Humans died. The losses were terrible, but slowly, impossibly, they began to win. The turning point came when made her decision. The or Queen was somewhere in the swarm. She was the center of the brain that controlled all the others. Kill her, and the swarm would collapse into confusion. But her ship was buried deep within the enemy formation, protected by millions of drones. No fleet attack could reach her. The losses would be too great. Called her officers together and told them her plan. She would lead a small group of ships directly into the heart of the swarm. They would fight their way through, reach the Queen, and destroy her. "Admiral," her second-in-command said carefully, "that is a suicide mission." "I know. You cannot ask people to die for this." "I am not asking. I am going myself. Anyone who comes with me does so by choice." She expected a handful of volunteers. Instead, she got hundreds, so many that she had to turn people away. They launched at midnight time, 112 ships flying directly into the jaws of death. The swarm closed around them immediately, and the killing began. Ships fell one by one, watched friends die. She watched brave men and women sacrifice themselves to buy the others a few more seconds, but they kept moving forward. They kept fighting. When they finally reached the Queen's ship, only 7 vessels remained. ordered them to attack from different angles to draw the Queen's defenders away. Then she drove the Terran Unity directly at the heart of the enemy. The Queen's defenses tore her ship apart. Explosions ripped through the hull. The bridge filled with fire and smoke. Felt pain, terrible pain, but she kept her hand on the controls. In her last moment, she thought about her grandmother. She thought about the day of mercy. She thought about everything humanity had become because one alien had chosen not to destroy them. For, as she whispered, the Terran Unity struck the Queen's core and detonated every weapon on board. The explosion lit up space for 1,000 kilometers. The Queen died instantly, and across the entire swarm, millions of or suddenly lost their connection to the. They stopped fighting. They stopped coordinating. They turned on each other in confusion or simply drifted away into the void. General Wright and his forces drove the remaining or off the within 3 days. The survivors fled into dark space, broken and scattered, and the siege was over. On the surface of the stood before the human survivors. His ancient body trembled with emotion. He lowered himself to the ground, a gesture of respect so deep that Younger gasped in shock. No High Arbiter had ever bowed to another species. No had ever shown such submission. "Why?" asked, his voice cracking. "We gave you nothing. We were strangers who came to destroy your world. Why did you give your lives for us?" Commander was wounded. He was exhausted. He had lost friends he would never see again. But he smiled. "Because you gave us everything," he said. "You gave us a chance to become something good. You showed us that mercy was possible. Everything we are, we owe to you." He helped rise. "We are humans, we pay our debts. War was over, the survived. 4 million beings, all that remained of an empire that had once ruled 3 galaxies, stood in the ruins of their last refuge and wondered what would happen next. Their fleet was destroyed. Their worlds were gone. They had nothing left except their lives and their memories. Humanity gave them more. The Terran Accord offered the not charity but partnership. They did not treat the survivors as refugees or guests. They treated them as family. "Your people saved our entire species," President said in her address to the Terran Council. "They showed us mercy when they had every reason to destroy us. Because of them, we became who we are today. Now they need a home. We will give them one, not because we owe them, but because it is right." 7 worlds in Terran space were prepared for settlement. Human engineers worked alongside architects to build cities that honored both cultures. The crystal spires of design rose beside the steel and glass of human construction. Gardens were planted using seeds from both peoples. Schools were built where children of both species could learn together. But humanity did something more, something that they had never expected. They made the immortal. Not in body. Bodies fade and die, even crystalline ones, but in memory, in culture, in the hearts and minds of every human who would ever live. The memorial was built on Earth in Geneva, on the exact spot where the High Arbiter had delivered his judgment 125 years before. It was a tower of living crystal, grown from seeds that scientists provided. At night, it glowed with soft purple light that could be seen from orbit. Inside were recorded every name, every story, every piece of history from the civilization. Any human could visit and learn about the beings who had shaped their destiny. Schools across human space began teaching philosophy alongside human history. Children learned about the arbiters and their code of justice. They studied art and music. They read translations of poetry and literature. The language itself was preserved and taught so that future generations could speak the words of their saviors. Human scientists worked with researchers to combine their knowledge. The result was an explosion of new technology and understanding, medical breakthroughs that extended human, engineering advances that made starships faster and more efficient, scientific discoveries that opened new frontiers of exploration. But the most important gift was not technology, it was perspective. They had watched the rise and fall of civilizations for 10,000 years. They had seen species burn themselves to ash and others become monsters. They understood, better than any other beings in the galaxy, how easily good intentions could become terrible mistakes. They shared this wisdom with humanity. They became teachers and counselors and friends. And humanity, for the first time in its existence, had elders who could guide them. 50 years after the rescue, knew his time was ending. The ancient arbiter had lived for 6,000 years. He had ruled empires. He had made decisions that shaped the fate of galaxies. He had seen more than any being had a right to see. But in his final days, he found something he had never expected: peace. He spent his last months on Earth, in a small house near the memorial. Humans visited him constantly, seeking wisdom, sharing stories, simply wanting to be near the living legend who had changed everything. On his final day, he asked to be taken outside. They carried him to a garden where flowers from 100 worlds bloomed side by side. Children were playing nearby, human and together, their laughter mixing in the warm afternoon air. "I have lived long enough to see what mercy can create," said to those gathered around him. "When I spared humanity, I did not know what they would become. I only knew that there was something in them worth saving, a spark of something good." He looked at the children playing. That spark became a fire. It spread across the galaxy. It saved my people when all seemed lost. It gave us a future we had no right to expect. His crystalline body was dim now, the lights barely flickering. "I have made many decisions in my long life. Some were wise, some were foolish. But the best decision I ever made was choosing mercy over destruction, not because humanity repaid us, but because it was right." He turned to the human leaders who stood beside him. "Remember this, always, power is easy, destruction is easy, but mercy is hard. It requires faith in others, trust that the spark of goodness exists even in those who seem dangerous. That faith is what separates civilization from savagery." His lights flickered one last time. "We gave humanity a chance, and they gave us eternity. Perhaps this is the true measure of a species, not what they do with power, but what they do with gratitude." High Arbiter of the Dominion died as the sun set over Earth. He was mourned across the galaxy. His funeral was attended by billions, in person and through broadcasts that reached every corner of civilized space. 1,000 years have passed since that day. The Terran Alliance is now the largest peaceful coalition in 4 galaxies. They have never started a war. They have ended hundreds. They have lifted countless species out of suffering and given them chances to become something better. On every human world, children still learn the story. They learn about the day of mercy. They learn about and the choice he made. They learn about the war to save thee and the heroes who gave their lives. And they learn the old saying that has become humanity's creed: "We were spared once, we will never forget, and we will spend forever proving they were right about us." In the great hall of the Alliance capital, there is a wall that stretches for kilometers. On it are carved the names of every who served in the fleet that came to Earth, every who chose mercy over destruction, every being who made humanity's future possible. Visitors come from across the galaxy to see it. They stand in silence and read the names and wonder at the strange path of history. How one moment of compassion echoed across centuries. How one choice created ripples that changed everything. Some species believe in fate. Some believe in luck. Some believe that the universe is random and meaningless. Humanity believes in something else. They believe in mercy. They believe in gratitude. They believe that kindness matters, even when it seems foolish, even when it seems weak. Because once, a long time ago, a powerful being looked at a young and violent species and saw something worth saving. And that species never forgot. They made his name Immortal. They made his choice echo through eternity. And they proved, beyond any doubt, that he was right about them all along.